So how do we do this? How do we create confluence at the core and say we are doing Conflucore? Well, broadly, there are 5 phases. First phase is to start with a synthetic approach, not a deeply analytical approach. Analysis is now too much 20th century. Why we don't do the analysis to begin with? Because we are looking at the organization or the entire team or the entire unit. Why should we slice and dice it? And then we are never able to bring it together. Wise leaders and executives take the bull by the horn. They are always thinking about what's the complete picture and how is that going to be changed. They are very much interested not in slicing and dicing, but keeping the big picture in mind and correct at all times. And of course, times, as I said, are dynamic, so they have to be on top of it. So the first thing is to start with a large synthetic picture of the organization, include what needs to be, and not to introduce selective bias by removing things that don't fit into the spreadsheet or that don't typically fit into a function or a team. Those things are there. There are environmental effects even within a unit, within an organization, from rest of the organization that need to be included. And as I said earlier on, there are informal effects, decision rules, heuristics that we don't know. We haven't really articulated, but they're there. And so we have to introduce them. So that's the first thing. Begin with the big picture in mind, whether we are doing a diagnosis of an issue, whether we are trying to solve a problem, or bigger still, if we are trying to discover opportunities. Management consulting is not about, unfortunately, it has been come to be seen as problem solving. Well, I think that's part of it. But a significant part of it should be, and is in some cases, opportunity identification. Looking into the future, even when you're doing very well, and saying how you could do better and bigger. And as I said earlier on, Apple does that all the time. It doesn't look back. It doesn't benchmark blindly and go backwards, because then it will be regressing and becoming like most of the others. They try to differentiate and be different. Second step is to outline the confluence factor, or the lack of the confluence factor. How many of the processes are coming together, how many are not? When they do come together, what kind of streamlining and what kind of weaving effect do they have? Or are they tangential to each other and not necessarily coming together, even though separately they would look appropriate within those functions or departments or units. But when you look at it from a bigger perspective, the confluence factor gets hugely compromised and sacrificed. So we have to look at the asset portfolio, we have to look at the organizational structure, we have to look at the informal processes, we have to see people in action, and then we have to see intergroup relationships within and outside every function. Now this may seem like it's a huge undertaking. Not always. Sometimes it is. Remember earlier I said we could do this for breakthrough. In that case, it is a huge undertaking. Or we could do this for incremental improvement, in which case it is not. Third is to make a dynamic model of the core that will emerge, or you want to emerge, and through which you will learn the Confluent organization and its processes. So we all have mental models. We all have something in our minds of how things will operate. We do not necessarily externalize them and write them out. So they remain nascent even in our own minds. And of course, to the other person, they don't know what we are thinking. Now, our words and our metaphors do communicate quite a bit, but until we really sit down and make a model of things and how they are interacting with one another, we are really, really not doing a serious job at it. Fourth, we make informed, conscious, consequential choices. These are not rushed choices. This is not what the competitor is doing. This is not what benchmarking is saying, because benchmarking at its best is what was there yesterday. It is important when you are in deep trouble to look at what the benchmark is. But when you want to really go forward, that's not what you look at. So you look at, what are the consequential choices of every change in your model. And finally, nothing stops. As I said, things are dynamic, they keep moving, and therefore we must revisit our confluence and our confluent factor every now and then, periodically. And the periodicity will depend upon the nature of the industry. Technology will probably be doing it faster. People who are making sandbags and cement probably will be doing it longer. And that all depends also on the platform of the technology on which we are operating. So these are the 5 steps on the how to confluence, and I hope you will pick up all of them, or at least some of them, to start thinking about your organization. You see, management issues never are monocausal. There are multiple causes that result in issues. And we set ourselves wrongly when we say, what is the one thing we will change that will make a difference? Well, one thing rarely makes all the difference. It is a confluence of factors that come together. If we insist on one thing, and that one thing is going to ripple and create others, we don't know what those after effects are. So we have to see confluently what are the causes. So it's multiple cause. Secondly, it's not a one-time deal only. And I keep telling people, for example, leadership is not an event. Leadership development is an ongoing thing. And this is a metaphor for confluence as well, which is that you have to be confluent all the time. Reality is you are. To what degree you are confluent, you need to go find that out. And then, instead of taking this divide and conquer approach, taking a more holistic approach. The management issues that are multi-causal, they are recurring, they require difficult choices, but we have to make them. And so gone are the days, 20th century was about isolating issues, and handling them. Now, the 21st century is about integration, and it's about creating a single organization and body in which we are fully dynamic at the core. Our logo, to a large extent, is based on that. Allow me to explain. Conflu and core together, coming together, and conflu, the blue part, reminds us of confluence. Core reminds us of the energy at the center. There is always an outside-in influence, which we call environmental factor. In this case, it is shown with the yellow. And then the internal factors shown here in blue, because typically corporations like to take their color blue, although now it's changing more to red. And here is the core, which is in orange. It's not middle management, no. It is the flow at the core that is extremely sacrosanct for the organization. Identifying it, keeping it confluent, raising its confluence factor is going to make a huge difference for the organizations of the future. We can also think of it metaphorically as sun and sea, and us sort of sailing and enjoying the sunlight, the energy, as well as the waves that we go through. I hope this has given you a tour of this concept of Conflucore. It is not just another thing to do. It is a new way of looking at organizations. And those that do, there are few right now, but it's increasing, they are very effective. Let me now leave you with a few questions. But before that, let me also remind you, we have defined Conflucore. We have seen why it is important and how it is different than what we have been doing so far in management. And the beauty of management is it's an evolving, growing, progressing field, and I just love it. And I'm glad that this is the next step in it. Then we have also talked about how to do it. I would now like to leave you with a few questions, say 5 questions to think about, which will get you started on how to assess confluence and the Conflucore in your core.